Hey, what's up, comrade? So we're on to Elnard 2, which Elnard is the original Japanese name for Seventh Saga. And this one's not called Elnard 2, it's called Brainlord, which can be confusing. In fact, I did not realize this was a sequel to Seventh Saga slash Elnard until I was looking at some other things, and it was actually strategy. I mentioned this in my Seventh Saga review. I looked up because I was stuck on a part in Seventh Saga trying to figure out where I was supposed to go because there's an open world portion. And so I looked up and I found strategywiki.org, and they had literally had Brainlord as as a sequel to Seventh Saga, and I was like, I remember seeing this Brainlord game in like a Nintendo Power ad like years ago, but I had no idea it was related to this at all. And so I was like, that's so interesting. Okay, so I'm going to check it out. So Brainlord is an action role-playing game. It's more of just it's like more of a action, like third-person isometric kind of viewpoint, like a Link style game, like a Legend of Zelda style game. You don't really level up. In fact, I would say it is very much like a Legend of Zelda game. You find heart containers, essentially. You find hearts. You find these power boosts. You can find defense boosts. You can purchase new weapons. Outside of the power boosts and stuff, you have these jades, which let you summon fairies, and some of the fairies can give you more. They can attack. They can give you light in a dungeon. They can do attacks of different kinds: lightning attack, fire attack. They can give you more defense, various things. You also have magic. Magic's unlimited. You don't have you have life hit. You have like hit points essentially, and the more hearts you get, the more hit points you get. But your magic doesn't go up or down at all. It's just a charge. Like instead of doing like a charge attack, you charge spells. So you can change out your spells to different. Very enjoyable, all of it. Right? There's a ton of different spells. There's a ton of different jades. You can have two jades at the same time. So I mostly am running with attack one that gives me more attack, so I can do more damage. And then I have one that shoots fire. And the jades level up by picking up these like blue crystals that are very rare. There's one bad guy in like one of the caves that just drops it every time. So I kind of like grinded it out. They max out at level 19, but it only takes like 2 to 4 of these crystals per level for these things. So I maybe spent like half an hour, maybe up to an hour, and I got both like the attack and the fire one to like level 15 almost. And then I was like, that's good enough. I'm on like the second dungeon of the game. And that's really what this is. You have a central town, and then you go to dungeons, and then at some point in the game, you switch to like another town, and there's a few more dungeons, and that's it. And the main character is Reemer. So this is literally your main character. So it's my Asuna character in my canon for this world killed Satan, went back in time, killed Satan again, got destroyed. God brought her back to life as Reemer. Now Reemer is born, and the game starts off with a little introduction. You're hanging out as Reemer, and your dad comes in and he's like, "Hey, we're descendants from like the Dragon Warriors, and not Dragon Warrior like Dragon Quest Dragon Warriors, like Dragon Warriors who rode dragons. And there's like one dragon left, or there's no dragons left, or dragons are very rare. But I'm gonna go find this dragon in the Tower of Light, and I'm gonna bring like prestige back to our family, and like we're gonna have great times had by all kind of situation." And then your character like wakes up from the nap he's having at a bar in this town, the town of Ark, I think it's called. And from here we meet like a colorful cast of people that we will continually run into in the dungeon. So some of these characters include Ryan, who has like a purple robe. And he's like, "Oh, I love adventure. Let's do adventure." And there's like a sheet of paper in the inn on the wall that's like a quest to go get dragon scales from the Tower of Light. Anyone who wants to go, you'll get paid handsomely. And then you can find the blacksmith in town who's like, "I will give you 10,000 gold," which really isn't that much, to go bring me dragon scales. And everyone, so there's Ryan, there's Baron. It's like Barony or something. He's like an older man, an older adventurer. Then there's like Kirshan, who is like this very sassy. Well, she's not sassy. She's very like hard-nosed, kind of straightforward. And this is the way this is portrayed is just like you run into these people and they have conversations with you. So Kirshan is like very straight-laced, hard-nosed adventurer woman. And then there's like, I'm trying to remember what her name is. It's like Marison or something. It starts with an M. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it starts with an M. Anyway, and she's like the sassy, sexy one. She does some flirting with Reemer at different times when you're into her. But it's interesting because they all have like they all interplay with like the story of the game, and there really are that's like the story. There's not much going on with the story. Like you said, you go to the blacksmith. He's like, I'll give 10,000 gold if you can go get me these things, and then the game plays. And you start off with a sword and a shield. So the shield automatically blocks, but you can also hold it to block. And each shield has like a certain amount of defense. So like the starting shield. So the first quest you have to do, because everyone's like, oh, you need to get a shield and some more equipment. You should go talk to this lady. She's having rat problems in her attic. And so go kill rats, and you get a bunch of money, so you can buy your first jade if you want. I don't think I did. I think I just waited till I got my first one in the Tower of Light, which sounds a lot cooler than it really is. And then you head off to the tower. Oh yeah. And then you get a shield. So now you have a shield. You got a sword, and you got armor. And the armor gives you defense, and you have a helmet, and the helmet gives you defense, and then the shield lets you block things, and the sword has like a sweeping attack. Some of their weapons are an axe. Axes they're strong, but they have like a very short like range. Swords have like a medium range. There's a morning star which shoots kind of forward a little bit. Then you can get bows and arrow which shoot pretty far, and then you have boomerangs. Boomerang is the best, hands down. The boomerang is always the best weapon. It does like, you can throw a bunch of them, and they do this like arcing attack, and they go pretty far. Not as far as the bow and arrow, but pretty fucking far. Like farther, as far as you're gonna need them. So like you get the boomerang right before the second dungeon, and it's like it's gonna be hard. It's like hard pressed to like really get a better weapon, just because of the range. Like even when weapons do more damage, you're like, eh. Like the axe is almost virtually worthless because you get so close to the enemy, and enemies do like long range attacks all the time. So it's like you really got to like scoot your ass up there to like get them. So the magic's interesting. I feel like I got all the spells that the game has to offer in the first town. Like they just sell them in a shop. You find a couple in the dungeon. So I got the names messed up. I'm going to correct myself right now. The reason I'm correcting myself, because normally I don't give a fuck, but it's very important for the sequel. So Ferris is the very straight-nosed, kind of like serious girl who's like good at adventuring. And it's important that we know who that is because it's relevant to the story. Like her name is actually relevant because it carries forward. So there's Reemer, the main character. There's Ferris. There's Rian, I think his name is Ruin, who is kind of the purple guy who's kind of a screwball. There's Baron, who's like the older adventurer. And then there's the younger adventurer who's kind of flirty. And she gets referred to as like a kid a couple times by Ferris. So we know that she's slightly younger, more impetuous kind of situation. She is like the Mashini on, or whatever. I'm going to call her Mash. So that's like Sword Art Online. So she's she's Mash. And so that's like the crew. That's like the adventuring party, quote unquote. All right. Anyway, moving on. So Ferris. With the magic, you're in the dungeon. So constantly you're in the dungeon and you keep bumping into the different characters, right? So Ferris is the one who usually gives you items because she'll be like, oh, I already have this. Like in the town in the beginning, someone mentions, oh, it's really nice to have x-ray goggles because they let you see the floors, right? And that's like your map in this game. And someone's like, oh yeah, I think Ferris has a pair. So you go talk to Ferris and she's like, this is my pair, you can't have it. And then later on when you're in the dungeon, she's like standing next to a treasure chest and you're like, what's up, girl? And she's like, oh, hey, this chest has a x-ray goggles, but I already got some, so you can have them. And she does it a couple times. There's like a point where it's the same thing happens, but it's like with magic. She's like, oh, I got this magic spell, but I already had like the magic gem to let you cast it, so here you can have it. And that's like your basic spell. It's just like you charge it up, it's a short charge up, and it does like a long range attack. Which right around the time you get this, in the dungeon I was getting the bow and arrow, which I didn't like the bow and arrow that much. You have to like, it's just not very good. Because it's not like you shooting arrows, right? Like in a Magic Knight Ray Earth for Sega Saturn, where like the Fu, when she has her bow and arrow, it's just like you press a button and it shoots arrows. This is like you gotta kind of press it, and the arrows are slow, and then there's like, it's really not that good. Especially when you compare it to the boomerang, which you get later, and the boomerang is the best weapon. And there's two boomerangs, and I got the second boomerang. When I got the second boomerang, that was like the last time I switched weapons in this game. It does. The weapons don't do that much damage. Like the axe again does like exponentially more damage, but the range is like very minuscule. Like the best axe I think gives you like 20 attack, while the best sword gives you like 10, maybe 12, and this boomerang gives you 9. But I can shoot like 4 boomerangs at the same time. Like you can just be like ba ba ba, and then they're long distance, so you can just hit and run, and it's like makes everything else kind of irrelevant in my personal opinion. So that's the way to play this game. But the magic, so some of the magic spells, there's a slow spell, which slows guys down. There's a shield spell, which is kind of what I roll with. I don't really use it that much, but it creates a shield, and the shield does damage to people, and it deflects things, so that's not bad. There's like they call it magic missile, and it just shoots like these like little balls out, and they randomly track things. Trying to think. There's really not that many spells. There might be another spell that I never used or even looked at, because I was just like, magic, whatever. If you're playing with the axe because you want to do you hate yourself and you just want to take a lot of damage trying to hit things that are moving around really fast, go nuts. But then magic's going to be like kind of the key. You might want to have a fairy that does like long distance damage too. Or there's a fairy that's called Anger, or it's like Anger Jade. I can't remember what his actual name is. It's like Pisan or something. And then that'll attack things. But that's magic. So that's your weapons, your magic. The items, there's like items that give you more life, and there's items that give you temporary boosts in your guard and your attack. And then you can find the items, like I said, like a Zelda game, that give you more hearts, or they give you permanent more attack and more guard. And guard and attack are really the only stats. There's a speed stat. There's an armor you can get at some point called a cloak, which gives you 0 defense, but lets you move really fast. And according to one of the guides I was reading, there's in some versions of the ROM, or even like the original game, like the armor didn't give you any extra guard. So you might as well just equip the cloak, because it just makes you faster. But in the version I got from... not Cool Realms. Oh, fuck. Why can't I remember what it is? Anyway, the version I got, CD-ROM. CD Romance. Yep, CD Romance. That version of Brain Lord, you're good to go. The different... upgrading your armor gives you more guard. And guard just makes it so you don't take as much damage when things hit you. Okay, I think that's everything about the items in the game. You move around, you can jump. Yeah. It's pretty straightforward. It moves pretty well. The ROM version I'm playing, I don't know if the original's like this. Some Super Nintendo games kind of had a little bit of slowdown as well, but I think that's more of a ROM issue. Sometimes there'll be like a lot of stuff going on, and the game will slow down a little bit. But that actually is almost beneficial, because most of the game is puzzles, right, and kind of working things out. So if it slows it down a little bit, it's not like it's harming you. It's just everything slows down a little bit. It's not like a lag where it's like you lose part of what's going on, or it like skips. There's no skipping. It just kind of like drags a little bit. And so it's almost like easier when it drags, because you can like time your jumps a little better. Because when you jump, you can kind of move a little bit as well after you've jumped. So it'll help you kind of land where you actually want to land. And then with bad guys, you can kind of see their attacks a little easier. So it's almost like a cheat. Makes it a little simpler. All right, so within the dungeons, there's 5 dungeons. Within them, every level or so is going to have like a save point statue. You click on that save point statue, and it saves your game, but also creates like a portal. So you have these items called warp portals, something like that. They're warp stones or something, and they allow you to warp to any statue you've been to, and to the 2 towns that exist. Let me think. Is there anything else I'm going to talk about mechanically? It all works pretty well. Things cost money. Money's like the really only thing you get from killing bad guys, besides like occasionally dropping one of those level ups for your fairies. And if you die, you lose half your money. There's a reviving mirror that if you equip it and you die, it just resurrects you right there. So that's nice if you're not losing like save states. I just sell them as they come along, or they just sit in my inventory and I forget about them because they're pointless. Because I'm meticulous about save stating in every game that I play. So, but that's, if you're playing on this originally, it'd be nice, because then you're not losing money, and the money can help you buy items, and the items are going to help you live longer. Again, I'm save stating, and like I'm cheating by using the boomerang because it's so overpowered compared to everything else because of the range. And you could shoot 2 or 3 of them out at a time. I think it's just 2, but which just makes you you just kill things so fast. And then I have my like attack fairy that I just leveled up when I got to that one area where the guys just kept dropping these things, and so then I'm doing so much damage. Like I kill almost everything in like 1 or 2 hits. Like even bosses. Like the first boss took me a minute because I wasn't fully leveled up, because the fairy trick is in the second dungeon. So it took me a little bit to kill him, but it wasn't that hard. I didn't have the boomerang, but I got the boomerang and I leveled up my attack fairy. And the second boss I killed in like 5 hits or something. It was like embarrassing. Like I killed it so quick, and it almost got me for a second. And we'll get to that. We'll get there and explain why when we get there. But it almost killed me. But then after that, I was like, okay, that's the trick. That's what this guy's like thing is. So I'll just avoid that. And once I did, I just like slaughtered this thing so fast. Like I was like, wow, that was really fast. All right, so Everything mechanically and everything good. Prove it. Lots of different ways to handle situations. You can make it harder on yourself by using an axe, or make it easy by using the boomerang, which I will always choose to do. Middle ground, swords and Morningstar. There's bows, which are just like worse boomerangs, so there's no reason to ever use them. Like the best bow does like 1 more attack power, I think, than the best boomerang. So why? Why would you ever use that? And then the spells are, they're there, they exist, they do stuff, I guess, if you really want them to. All right, so the game, as I mentioned, starts off, and you're having like a flashback to when you were a kid and your dad left you to go find the last dragon, and then you wake up in the bar and you meet your colorful cast of characters. There's like shenanigans in town, and eventually you're like, all right, cool, I gotta go to the Tower of Light so that I can get these dragon scales. And also in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, also I would like to find my father or figure out what's going on with this dragon thing. So there's a guy in the 2nd floor of the hotel who sells jades, but you really don't have money for him. You can afford after you do like the you start with like 5,000 gold, and after you do the quest with the mouses and get your shield, and then you can go out to like the open world, quote unquote, like the initial stage before the first dungeon. And there's a lot of these transitory areas that just have like, they're very short and they have little monster areas. So if you want to like grind out money and not go all the way to the dungeon for whatever reason, because the dungeons are where like the puzzles exist, hence the name Elnard. So you can grind out some money so you can go buy a jade, which I did. I bought the fire jade. Oh wait, no, I found the fire jade. I didn't buy the fire jade. Maybe I bought the power jade. I thought I bought a jade. Maybe I found both those. Anyway, I ended up just buying these jades as time went on. But you can buy like the one jade that like every time you level it up, it like will resurrect you if it's active, but it will lose a level, and it's like, that's dumb. Why would I want this? It's terrible. So I never used it. Or bought it. I don't think I even bought it. I might have bought it just to have everything in case I decided I wanted to later. So you enter the Tower of Light, and as you're going through the Tower of Light, there's puzzles. I'm not going to explain every puzzle trick to you. If you really want, you can look up. I use strategywiki.org, how these puzzles go. Most of them are pretty straightforward. A couple of them are kind of obtuse. There's one puzzle in here that was like the time goes up, or it's like the number goes up, but the time stays the same, and it was like 12:52 blank. And I was like, the fuck is this supposed to be? And it's just year. It's how many months, how many weeks, and how many days in a year. And I'm retarded, so I couldn't figure that out. But that's the only puzzle I was like, what the fuck is this? Everything else you can kind of like figure out on your own pretty simply. Like it's really just more about like spending some time thinking about it. Like there's like the different puzzles involve like you'll have rolling rocks, and there's gray rocks that you have to push, and they'll bounce back and forth if there's like a short space between them. Otherwise, they'll just like you'll push them and they'll go to like the end spot and stop. There's rocks which go one space at a time. So the gray balls like roll to the end of the room. And like I said, if it's like a small space, they'll bounce a little bit. And then there's the red balls that will only move to chase you. And all these things, like they'll hurt you. And the gray balls would technically hurt you too if you get them to a space where they're bouncing back and forth. And one of the bosses uses those as part of his like moveset, is like launching these things at you. So the red balls are the most annoying because they chase you around. So the puzzles always involve like one of these things, or they involve like stepping on buttons on the ground in a certain order, or on like just certain ones to like add up to a certain number or to spell the number out. So like for the year one, you got to step on like the 3rd button, the 6th button, and then the 5th button. Right? There's 365 days in a year, I'm pretty sure. And that opens the door. Right, and then there's keys. So you find keys. You go through all these. You do puzzles. You get keys. Use the keys to unlock other doors. There's like some secrets, like in the Tower of Light. The big secret, and this I only found like 3 spots to really do this, is that if you push against certain walls, you will open up like a secret chamber, and they'll usually be like a good item, or like a heart container, or like a power up, or like a new weapon or something behind these areas. So it's worth like kind of investigating. It's pretty obvious if you push on the wall and your guy starts to and Reemer starts to push on the wall, you can push the wall open. And they're not like telegraphed super well, but you can kind of like get you can kind of like, this looks like a wall I could push on. And it takes like 0 amount of time to like just push against the wall. So you can just push, and if the guy starts pushing, if he just walks like normal, or then it's like, no, that's not a wall you can push. So you can literally just hug walls and find this out. But they're all pretty kind of straight. I don't want to say super straightforward, but they're not like that obscure, in my opinion. I mean, I probably missed 1 or 2, but Didn't matter because Boomerang's in the next level anyway, so that's what really matters. They also have spike traps. These are pretty well telegraphed. They're hidden, so it'll be like a blue floor, and then you're just walking along the blue floor, and then you get hit with like a spike trap, and you're like, fuck. But if you look at like the block, like the square that you stepped on, you'll see like a small, tiny square. Like you stepped on this square that set off the trap, and that's what sets it off. So as long as you're keeping an eye out for that, you can just avoid stepping on those. Like there's never a time when you like have to get hit by these things. So that's good. It's interesting, right? So there's lots of little traps and tricks and stuff. The story in this one, as you're going along, at some point, I mean, again, you just run into like your friends, and they're all doing different stuff. Ferris hands you a couple things, like she gives you the first spell, and she gives you the X-ray goggles, as I mentioned before. What is going on here? It's crazy nonsense. And then I'm just gonna get off here. Then Baron, he gives you like good advice, and at one point he's like, "Hey, there's 2 buttons here to get to the door, and that's like to the boss of the level. But I can only press one button, and you can press the other. But then neither of us can go to the door. So let's find one of our other friends, and they can help us get through this." And you go and find Rian, and he's just like chilling by like a save point, and you're like, "Oh, wait, you need my help? Thank you." Rian's interesting. He's kind of like stupid but headstrong, and he likes to rush into things. That's like how he approaches all this stuff. So you'll see him, and he'll be like, "Oh, I went into here, but like I don't know about that," or he's like, "Hey, you go ahead first," or "Oh, I fell down this hole again. I should have realized that it was there, so I could like not fall in it so many times. I'm being silly sometimes." And you're like, "Yeah, it's cool, bro. No worries." And then, like I said, Ferris is kind of like straightforward. She's like very adventure oriented, and she's kind of like more serious. She's like the straight man. Baron gives you good advice, and at times he'll be like, "I'm too old for this shit. Let me just sell you some recovery items and heal you up." And then Mash is all about being like, a young dumb adventurer, essentially, and being like impulsive and sneaky. And in fact, she's so sneaky that like when you get to the last area, and you go and fight the boss, which there's no dragon here, unfortunately. There's just a big cockroach boss that every time you hit him, he releases a bunch of little cockroaches, which seems a lot crazier. And it's kind of chaotic, but it's not that chaotic. And you can only hit him from like the front, and he'll like scurry around the room. So you just kind of like, I had the fire guy, and the fire guy was like taking care of all the side dudes, and I would hit them occasionally with my sword, because this whole level we're just using the sword. But the sword has a nice arc. So I was just avoiding the little guys, trying to work my way to the cockroach guy, and then hitting him. Sorry about that. Hitting him when I had the opportunity. And he went down. It took a little bit. Like I probably say he probably took at least 10 shots, and it was a lot of like him scurrying around, and there were times when I couldn't really hit him. And then I wanted to hit him and move, because I'd hit him and then he'd like throw these like little cockroaches at me, so I wanted to like get out of that way and then kill some of those guys and then go hit him again. So the whole thing didn't get like so overwhelming. But it worked out pretty well. No big deals. I beat him on my first try. Oh, there's also jump puzzles in this part where you can jump 2 squares. So you can jump up on things, so you can jump up on like platforms and stuff, but the only kind of platforms you really need to jump up on are these platforms that you can sort of move. When you press like a direction, they will like keep going in that direction until you press a different direction. And those don't show up that often. In fact, I don't think there's any in this first dungeon that I can recall off the top of my head. So that's one type of jump, and then you can jump like over 1 square. So you can jump pretty far, and that's often used. And then, so there'll be like moving platforms you got to jump onto in this first part, for example. And then just like, you just have to make some jumps. So you get, after the cockroach boss, you enter like the dragon chamber, and there's like 1 dragon scale left. And then Ruin's there, and he's like, "Oh man, you missed out. We already like cleared this place out." But before you get to this room, entering like the boss area, on the top of the boss area, with like the back entrance, you see Mash standing there, and she's like, "I'm working on something. I'll tell you if I can get it figured out." And what she did is she like broke into the back door, and so she made out like a bandit, right? So you're like, fuck. And so you get the dragon scale, and then Reemer heads back to town, and everyone's like, "I'm so rich, I sold these dragon scales." And you go back to your blacksmith homie, and you're like, "Hey, I got a dragon scale. Can I get my 10,000 gold?" And he's like, "Hold up. I actually got a lot of dragon scales, so the price has changed." It is now 2,000 gold. And at first I'm like, "Fuck you." And then I came back later because I was like, I don't want this fucking thing in my inventory just taking up space. Like, you can give me my fucking 2,000 gold, you asshole. And I literally had like 45,000 gold at this point just from like killing mobs in the game. And so it was like, man, what an ass. That's nothing. This is like hot garbage. And you can find, that's the other type of item I didn't mention was there's items that are just like silver, gold, ancient coin, and like crystal, I think. And you just sell them, but you sell them for like 5,000 gold. And it's like, yeah, that's a decent amount, I guess. But like, I only bought one weapon the entire game. Well, I bought two because you have to buy the axe to get to the second dungeon. And then I bought the second boomerang because you can only buy it, and that's it. I never bought anything else. I just like find items, and I sold most of them because I have the boomerangs. And I actually think I bought the first boomerang because I didn't want to wait to get it because I was like, boomerangs are fucking sweet. Like, they're in Dragon Quest and they are here. Anyway, so that's the first dungeon. Nothing story-wise too interesting. You keep running into the characters so you can kind of get a feel for their personalities, and that's excellent. And even when you come back to town, like, things have adjusted. Like, there's like a weaponsmith, there's like the weaponsmith who gave you the quest, and then there's like a weapons merchant. And at the beginning of the game, he's like, I can't sell you anything. I'm not ready. I don't have like the supplies yet, and because of the monsters, right? But since you quote unquote cleared out the Tower of Light, now supplies can come in. But it's like I'm organizing thing. And then the son of the innkeeper and the son of the blacksmith are like bugging him about getting weapons because his father, the blacksmith, he loves digging in his basement, right, which his wife like comments on, and he's like stumbled upon like this ruins, and he's like, oh, you want to see the ruins? You can go down there, but you better get an axe because there was a cave in, and the only way to get past the stones is with an axe, and that's why. And then when you go back, you can buy the axe. Also, there's another character who like went to the Tower of Light previously. He's the one who initially tells you about the X-ray goggles. And so when you come back after taking care of the Order of Light, because I guess he lost like his best friend there, I almost feel like it was implied that his best friend is your dad. So your dad like died in this trip and he came back and he was just sad. But the fact that you were able to go and defeat the cockroach and like get the dragon scales and came back, it like inspired him to stop being such a shitbag and to actually like help out around the town and, you know, not just be a layabout drunk. So that's a fun like side story. Like, you can just completely ignore. So the thing I really like about these games, like Seventh Saga and this, is just like the very subtle storytelling, right? It's not as like obtuse. Like, it's there if you just like talk to people, right? It's not like a Dark Souls thing where I gotta like look at item things and like really read into things a lot and kind of like put pieces together. It's really just like, if you just like, every time you go to town, you talk to everybody, and then like if someone's like, hey, so-and-so might be over at the inn, you go to the inn and talk to them. You're getting like a pretty rich, enriching story that's like pretty much almost completely optional to even like pay attention to. Like, a lot of these little side stories, how characters interact. Like the lady you clear the mice is out for, she talks about how her son went and like, used to be an adventurer, but then like he passed, and like there's a whole bunch of stuff upstairs in the attic, and like you're not just going to kill rats, you're going to like take care of the rats to like help this woman out who there's a reason there's like a shield up there. Like, everything's like explained. There's not just like, here's random shit lying about. So I really appreciate that. And so you talk. Oh, there's a scene at the beginning. I totally forgot about this, where it's like you're at the inn, and if you walk into like Mash's inn room, she's like, "I'm changing you, pervert. Get out." It's good stuff. And then later on, she like makes a comment about it too. She's like what you saw, asshole. It's excellent. So yeah, you can just kind of touch base with people. They're all like super excited to go get more money and more stuff, and they're all like, I'm like living the high life with all my dragon scale money, but now I'm going to go to the ancient ruins, and the ancient ruins are like, there was like so this is the town of Ark, and there's like the ancient Ark or whatever. I think it was like the ancient empire of like the Able ruins. I think it's the Able ruins, like the ancient Able kingdom that like something happened to it, but they were like super technologically advanced. It's very like reminiscent of Millennium from Seventh Saga, where it's like, and you go down there and there's robots and shit, right? So we head down, and there's like the initial kind of like entry before the actual dungeon is a cavern, and we get new enemies. So we get a new enemy. The new enemies are this like orc thing. So in the previous dungeon, there was really just like, there was these like ogre-looking things that were like super easy to kill. There were some bats, and then there was like, I think we ran into like one knight, and the knight guy is like a little bit bigger and a little bit tougher to kill. So you really have to be like careful, because if they touch you, they hurt you. So you don't have to like really do damage. But there's only like one of those guys in the mini boss. we can introduce these like orc-looking characters, which can take a lot of fucking hits. But they're with the boomerang, you just hit them and they like, when you hit stuff in this game, they'll like push back a little bit. So you just boomerang again. It's like it's the optimal weapon because it's just like from a distance you can like kite these guys. You can just keep them back. And then there's scorpions which will poison you. Which reminds me that I didn't bring this up before, but yes, you can buy antidote herbs, and there's another herb. I don't know what it does yet, so I got poisoned once by a scorpion, ever, maybe twice, because you can just nothing touches me because I'm they're not that fast, and I see them and I like hit them with my thing. And then there's these like Morningstar wielding kind of like Minotaur demon looking things. They're a little tougher. Once I got my level up, with my fairy, they would go down in one hit as well. And then we get introduced to these mages, which they'll shoot magic, disappear, reappear, shoot magic. It reminds me of something. I can't remember what the name of the game is, but like maybe Zelda? Yeah, it's like the Zelda mages. So again, this game's very Zelda-y. But they die in like one hit. They give you a lot of gold. Like 600, which is most enemies, even like harder enemies. Like they'll be like really easy enemies that give you like 200 gold, and then there'll be like enemies that are much more difficult and they'll give you 100 gold. Like there's almost like no rhyme or reason for it. Usually the more difficult to kill enemies will give you more gold, but sometimes that's not the case. So I don't know. But it's at this point that we enter into the Able Ruins. So like I was saying, the Able Ruins is very like technologically advanced. So once we get through the cave, we enter this like Meninum, right? Like it's all very technologically. They got like conveyor belts, and there's Tetugian guys that look like Lux from the first game, and then we have these like floating disc monster like robot things, and then there's like there's just like other random bullshit, but it's a lot of the like the mages and stuff I mentioned before, but it's a lot of the robotic guys, and the puzzles here like really amp it up. Like the puzzles in the Tower of Light I felt like were pretty straightforward. There was a couple I needed to look up. There was one I think that the year puzzle thing was really throwing me off. In this one, there's a lot less like thinking man's puzzles, as in like, hey, here's a riddle, like riddle me this. It's much more of like here's blocks and balls and holes and shit, like good luck. And so it took a lot more like experimentation, or just looking it up at some point. I don't got all day to like sit here and think about like how to solve some of these puzzles. And this continues onward. So the difficulty, it's a good ramp up of difficulty, as in like in the game's called Brainlord, and you really had to like spend some more time thinking about it. At this point, I had the boomerang, as I said, so the monsters became almost like irrelevant. Plus, I have save states, so like if I was really getting hurt up, like whatever. And then my inventory was like almost max full of like healing items and like reviving mirrors and stuff. So the challenge was just in getting from room to room, and then the level is somewhat of a maze. It wasn't so bad. Like you really have, because you can always use the not the 3D goggles, the X-ray goggles, but you really had like these two or there might have been three kind of like big box rooms. I think this thing was only like 3 or 4 levels, to be honest. But then each one of these big squares has like several rooms, like locked rooms and unlocked rooms. But I never felt like I had to go like back and forth too much from the levels. Like once I was like proceeding forward, like I could just kind of keep moving forward, and sometimes I'd have to backtrack a little bit, but usually it was backtracking out of a room to get back to like the main big room to proceed forward. As the story goes, we get some more like fun interactions with Mash and with Ferris, and the Baron at some point is like, I'm getting too old for this shit. Like Murdoch from fucking Lethal Weapon. I'm getting too old for this shit. Literally, he's just like in a room, and you're like, hey, Brady, what's going on? And he's like, oh, man, I'm getting too old for this. I'm going to let you go ahead. But, hey, you know what? I got some shit to sell you, and then I'll heal you up before you go. And you're like, thanks, buddy. And then he proceeds to do that going forward for the most part. Good old Baron. It's like Baroness or Baronese or something. I don't know. I just call him Baron. We also find out from Ruin, the purple-cloaked fella, who's like our other homie, he's about and around, and like I said, he like falls down holes and stuff. Oh, the big assholery thing here that I noticed, the only reason I noticed is because I saw it at strategywiki.org. The game kind of hints at it. Like you'll see some plaques on the wall, and they'll be like, turn around and jump into the pit. That you can now randomly, essentially, not randomly, because it's pretty much like, there's a couple places where it's like, you just have to be jumping down holes to figure this shit out. But there's like a bunch of like secret rooms. I want to say there's at least 5 secret rooms, maybe 6. Where you get like when you jump down a hole, if you jump down in a certain place, it takes you to like a treasure area, and then when you like leave that treasure area, you just end up like back at the previous level you were at, which I don't know how that makes sense, but it does. And like I said, sometimes there's plaques that tell you about it, and sometimes you just gotta make that leap of faith every single chance you get to figure out where these shits are, or I don't know, use a guide like I did, which would be my advice. But they usually have pretty good stuff, like you're in heart containers or power ups. There's a lot of shitty, just like random garbage items, which is a proud tradition carried on from Elnard #1, 7 Saga. Where I had so many like shitty items that the game just was like piling up on me that I didn't pick up most of them. Or I'd pick them up and the game would just be like, you already have max of this, in the garbage you go. The nice thing about this one though is if you run out of inventory space, you get like 3 chunks of inventory space, and each one has, God, I don't even know, like 20 items. So you can hold like 60 items. Now things don't double up, so if you have like a warp gate and another warp gate, it takes up 2 spots. Again, kind of going with that. I guess like Zelda doesn't really do that because you can pile up like bombs in the same slot or like arrows. But anyway, but if you open a chest when you have full item slots kind of filled up, then it's just like you can't open this, and then you can like open it up later, so you can like use some food or dump stuff or whatever. But we work our way around here. The big fun story we get here, besides like Baron being like too old for this shit, is that is that at some point Ruin's like, you know what? After this, I'm gonna retire because guess what, homie? I'm engaged. And I'm like, oh no shit, you're engaged for Rizzle? And he is. He like no fucking joke is. Like, when did that happen? So that's fun. And then we get some more like straightforward, no nonsense from Ferris, and then Mash the mischievous one. And eventually we get to the end, and the boss at the end of the ruins is a big orb. And this is the guy I was telling you about before, where there's 2 balls, like the roly balls that you can push, and then this big robot kind of ball with a big red eye that opens sometimes. And he just moves around the room very slowly, but then he'll suck everybody in. And if he sucks you in and you land on him, you just take damage. And that's where I almost died. I got away with just 1 hit point left, because as he's sucking you in, there's like no way to get away. Like I was trying to jump and move, and maybe if I jumped a little more, the jump seems to have some ability on that. But then I was like, fuck this. So then I equipped the cloak, and then I was able to kind of like move away enough where he wasn't able to do damage to me. And this is the guy where I hit him like, it felt like I hit him 5 times with the boomerang, and like all my stuff charged up, and he died. Like it was pretty simple and straightforward. Like not any kind of challenge whatsoever. Once I realized like what he was doing and how to like defeat it. So thank you, cloak. Oh, the cloak's an item you get here that increases your speed but gives you 0 defense. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but that's also a find in the evil ruins. And then you get to the end, and there's like some more treasure and stuff, and then everyone's like, cool, we got all this treasure, this is great, let's go. And so you head back to Ark, and everyone starts talking about Torontoro, I think is how you pronounce it. Toronto, which is this town to the south. And people really haven't been trading too much with them, because it used to be a town full of monsters, but then like it was some heroes like cleared it up. But it's still like you got to cross like this dangerous area, and the area is more dangerous. You got these kind of like funny, I want to say like kind of look like Wilmy type characters, like these kind of alien looking guys with no shirt and like wild hair that kind of stab at you. And then we get some more the arrow shooting guys that kind of look like wolves, just kind of up on ledges and stuff. But we have our trusty boomerang. We also bump into a statue, which is missing a gem, which is very important later. But it's like, oh, someone took this gem. If only we had it, we could utilize it to do something. And you're like, cool, moving on. So then we work our way. We get down to, before we even leave, we try to leave, because people are kind of talking about like, oh, maybe we should go to Toronto, or like Toronto. Oh, that's the most important thing about the Able Ruins is you find this like platinum or silver tablet, but you can't translate it. So then you take it to like the old man in town, whose daughter is the one who got you to kill rats in their roof, or in their second floor or whatever, in their attic. And he's like, oh, this is like old ancient text. I can read like a tiny bit of it, or like I can kind of pick out a few different words. But you know who really can do a good job on this? There's a scholar in Toronto, who's like an expert at this, so he could definitely translate it for you, so you could figure out what's going on with that. And you're like, oh, that's a good idea. Let's do that. So we try to leave, but the guy won't let us leave, like one of the guards in the town. But then we after we talk to the old man and some of our other companions, and we notice that like the ferry dealer in the hotel is gone because he's moved on, and some other people are talking about how other people have kind of like disappeared or moved on. At this point, we run into Ruin, and he's like, "Oh, hey, my fiance lives in Torinato. I'm gonna head out there, and then I have all these jewels, and I'm so wealthy now. It's gonna be great. I'm super excited." And you're like, "Awesome, bro." And then you see him leave the town, and then he comes back, and he's like, "Hey, get out of the way. My friend's coming too." And you're like, "Thanks, bro." And now we can leave. So then we go through this the middle passage between the towns, which is pretty straightforward. It's just you just kind of meander down there. It's outdoorsy. It's got some like plateaus and stuff. We get to Toronto, or I'm just gonna call it T. So from Ark, we get to T. We can still go back to Ark, which is nice. And this place has some new weapons. It has the best weapon in the game, as far as I'm concerned, which is the upgraded boomerang, which does twice as much damage, roughly. I think a little bit more. I think the boomerang does 4 or 5, and then the second boomerang does 9, which is not as much as like the Morning Star or the axe increases do, or even the best sword, but it's a lot because you can throw 2 of them. So essentially, it's more damage because it goes quick and it goes long distance and it pushes people back. So there's in no imaginable way is this not the best weapon in the game. So I have that now, and I'm super excited about that. We also get some new armor, some platinum armor, which gives us more guard. And a new shield, which is beautiful. The shields all look different, which is great. So the weapons and shields, like you're always carrying a shield, and every time you get a different shield, it looks different on your character, which is nice. Your armor never changes, so you always look the same in that regard. And then the weapons obviously look different. Like the boomerangs do not look any different than other boomerangs, and same thing with the various other weapons, aside from the fire sword, which comes up later, which looks slightly different when you use it. Okay, so what else is in this town? So we find the library in this town. Oh, there's like two massive like hotels or something. There's like the hotel you can go to, and there's like some of your companions are hanging out in there just like chilling. And then there's the big hotel. There's 2 big hotels. Oh, and then there's the mansion where Ruin's like fiance lives. And then what we learn in this town is that there's a goblin named Ramses or something, which is interesting because it's pretty much the same name as the dog from the first game. And the guys on strategywiki.org have like a theory that I'll get into later about the relationship between these characters, which is kind of interesting. I don't know how much I put into it, but it was like, oh, that's like an interesting thing. But so Ramses the Goblin came in with a bunch of monsters and kidnapped a bunch of people, including dun 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 Ruin's fiance. And he's like, no, I'm gonna go rescue her. And then he like runs off. And you talk to like her parents, and they're like, we really like him. He's a nice guy. Kind of an idiot. And I was like, bro, right? Veto. Golly, no joke. But whatever. Then we go find the library where the homie's at. And I found the fairy person, but he didn't have like any new fairies for me to buy, and I'm only using the main 2 fairies. I tried using the anger fairy for a little bit and the light fairy, but fuck those things. Oh, that's right. So in the one of the things in the Evil Ruins is that some of the rooms are dark, but they all have light switches in them, and they're really not that complicated once you get kind of the lay of the room. And there's not that many of them. So there's a light fairy, and you can level these fairies up to like level 19. I discovered because I maxed out one of their levels, and it's just the light gets bigger. But it's like, how much use is this? Maybe there's more dark rooms later. But it seems like very conditional and very unnecessary because, again, every single room has like a light switch. You just got to find the light switch without like falling down a hole or getting killed. So this light fairy, at some point when I was running through the Able Ruins, I just stopped using it. Even when I got to dark rooms, I was like, I'll just fucking walk around until I find this light switch. And I did without very many problems, like most of the time. So, whatever. That being said, yeah, like I said, I tried the anger, I tried the lightning. The lightning fairy didn't seem to do anything. Like, it says it does lightning damage, but it just kind of like hung out and never did anything. So I went back to the fire, because the fire would like shoot fireballs out pretty regularly. And they don't do a lot of damage compared to what I'm doing at this point, especially with my power fairy being like almost maxed out. It's doing like half the damage, if not less than I'm doing. But it's nice to have, because again, when it hits, it like pushes things back. And so it's like it's doing something. And some of the weaker enemies I bump into, it like takes care of like the cannon fodder, so I can concentrate on the bigger, more tough enemies that are periodically around as well. Let's see. Okay. So all good. All good stuff. Okay, so we get to the library, and there's full of books, and you can read all the books about the history and everything. And the history is very interesting. And again, it's one of these things with these games, these Elnard games, where there's a lot of effort. I don't know about a lot of effort. There was enough effort put into like the backstory and the history of the worlds and the different characters and different interactions and like the little side stories that you could just like miss or not be involved with. But it's like it adds like a richness to the world and to the people, and like makes me care more about what's going on and about like the plight of individuals because I'm more engaged with what they're doing. So the history of the world that we kind of gather is that there was this ancient civilization that got like destroyed and buried, right? So it can be, if we're looking at this as like a timeline with Elnard 1, it's definitely they're kind of hinting at like Menonym somewhat, I feel like, and especially when you go down there and you fight Tetugians, and it's not the same exactly, it's not an exact equivalency. So even if the guys who make these games are not really like holding fast to like a firm timeline of events, which seems like they're not really, it still kind of gives you like, this is kind of like the gist of what's going on, and there's these like, there's a kind of a continuing through line with these games, unlike the Quintet games, which they have common themes like ActRaiser, Soul Blazer, Lucian Agea, Terra Enigma, the PlayStation one, I can't remember, like with the 4 elements, but they're all different. They're like not related in the same world or same But this is like you're progressing along like this. The whole quadrilogy or whatever it's called with 4 games is following the life cycle of this character. So you get like the complete arc of life cycle, and then you take like the stuff in the middle, like what made him king, essentially, and that is what you focus on with these other 3 games. And so it's interesting, and that the most interesting thing is it's you from the first game that you start with, like the apprentice that you choose. Like Asuna, this is all Asuna, and then she's reborn as this other guy who goes and then dies again, right, in the first game. But there's all these adventures she has as like this guy in time. So that's fun. Okay, so I'm trying to remember, like, yeah, so it talks a lot about that. It talks a lot about the dragons and the dragon warriors and how they're, and it talks, and you can read books about like the fairy queen and how she used monsters to like help the people, but like goblins, and then there was like a corruption or she like disappeared, and that this fairy castle that, because the goblin supposedly works for the queen of the fairies who's in like the ice castle who's over there, and how she hasn't been seen in a while. Which is all interesting stuff. There's also a whole section of the library. Oh, and some of the bookshelves poison you. Fuck that. Fuck poison. I say definitely save scum those. But there's a portion of the library where it starts talking about the Dragon Warriors and the Destiny of the Dragons and all this stuff. And it's like all super, super old text. And it's all kind of like faded away. But it's interesting. It's interesting they did that, and it adds like a nice little oomph. So when you talk to this guy, he's like, "Oh yeah, I can definitely translate this stuff, but it's going to take me a minute. So maybe you should go like hang out at the arena or whatever." And you're like, "Ooh, arena!" And the arena is fantastic because it doubles up. Now I kind of mentioned this before that like the point of gold in this game really runs its course pretty quick. So by the time I got that second boomerang and then bought like the best armor they sell, like right after I did the second dungeon and got to this town, and I already owned like everything. So the only thing I need money for is items, but like monsters I have so much gold. I have like so much money. It's like out of control. Like I died like like spoiler alert, I died twice like in a row. And each time you die, you lose half your money in like the next dungeon. And I still had like 60,000 like coins, which like the most expensive armor is like 28,000 that I could buy at this point. And so it's like, the fuck, like, what am I supposed to do with all this money? But the arena has 2 awesome things. One, it has a battle arena where you can go and fight guys, and every time you win, you get money. And it doesn't do anything like fantastic, because again, you don't need money. So it's just kind of like, do you just want to keep fighting until see how far you can get? That's on you, buddy. High five, you do that. You can quit out any time. Every time you fight a random person, and I fought like the same person like 3 times. I fought like, I don't know, maybe 6 battles in a row. And I fought the same guy twice, not in a row, but like every time you choose the battle, and you can't heal between fights or any of that stuff. So it's like, it's a concept where it's like, I feel like there could be a lot more here, but why? Why would there need to be? There's no achievements in this game. There's no, like, the money is almost like whatever. It's like 1,000. I think I got 500 once. So it's like 500 to like 5,000 gold, just like every fucking thing else in this game. It's like 5,000 gold. So you don't really need the gold, but it's just like, I just want to do these like battles, and you have to battle with like a weak sword and a weak shield. So you don't get all your sweet ass fairies and stuff. So it's just like, it's like a fun little divergence. Like I played it for like, I don't know, maybe less than 10 minutes. And it was like, that was funny. Like, I like that this is here. I like this, that this exists in this world, and that this is something I can come do. But I don't need to be like sitting here doing this. And then they also have like a betting thing, like in the Dragon Quest games, like the early Dragon Quest games, you could like bet on monsters, and they'd have battles, and if you won, you won like a percentage. They have that here. So you get like 2 monsters, and they're gonna fight, and you can bet, and they give you odds, and so you can just you can rack up money doing that. Right, because you can spend like 1 to 1,000 gold. So if you're really like hard up for money and you have a little bit, you could like play the odds or just save scum and get tons of money. So that's interesting, and it's like, it's fun that they have this thing. I mean, there's no like reward to it, so I don't feel pressure like in the Dragon Quest games. Or sometimes I'm like, holy shit, I gotta spend like 16 hours at this fucking slot machine so I can get like the best shield in the game for Maya, because she's gonna be my wizard because she's the best and she's hot shit from Dragon Quest 4. But at the same time, it's like, oh, this is cool. If I needed the money or I just want to like watch monsters fight, I could do it. So I appreciate that they like put this here, right? And again, like, there's no pressure. Like, this game is like, besides the puzzles, which really aren't, it's like you have all day to like sit there and kind of figure it out. It's like, this game's like super chill. Like, it's a very chill experience, which I appreciate. Also in the arena, before we can like go into the arena officially and like fight, we have to do several things. So that's interesting too. So there's a whole subplot where, so we go to the arena and we talk to somebody, and they're like, oh, you know the guy at the library, you can come on in. So you can come on in and you can bet. And then Ferris is standing around her, and you can talk to her, and she's like, I need to talk to everybody at the end, so when you get a second, let's go. I have some information. And then you can go upstairs. The guy like runs the place, and he's like, oh, arena? I don't know what you're talking about. All right, you caught me. There's an arena, but you can't do anything about it. And you're like, but how? And you don't say anything ever, right? But then he's like, well, maybe this chest is like all fucked up and I lost the key. So if you can find me a key that will work on it, but there's no locksmiths in this area, so I don't know what you're going to do. But then you talk to like other people, right? And they're like, oh yeah, the weaponsmith used to be a locksmith before he was a weaponsmith. In town here, and you're like, oh cool, so you go talk to him behind the counter. So if you talk to him in front of the counter, you have to shop, but if you talk to guys behind the counter, you get like more story. And he's like, oh yeah, there's a couple keys upstairs if you want them. Like, I don't do that shit no more, but you can grab them up. And so you go get those, and there's 2 duplicate keys, right? So you go back to the guy and you use the duplicate key on the chest, or you give it to him and he's like, oh, that'll open my chest, thank you so much, all right, you can battle now. So then you go downstairs to go do the battle portion, and there's a guy who's like, I can't let you in here, we're full. And you're like, oh, okay, but then there's a locked door, so you use the other duplicate key on that door, and you go in there and you fight like one of those big mob knight guys I was telling you about. That aren't super hard, but they're like these big stompy dudes. And you kill him, and he's like, no, now I cannot fight in the arena. And so you murder this guy. So straight up just fucking murder this dude. So then you can go to the arena and fight guys. And so that's cool. Because then you go back to the guy, and he's like, yeah, I lost one of the guys on my list, so I guess you're up. This game's so good. It's so fucking awesome. I love it. And so there's no way to get to this desert because there's it got frozen. And there's literally no way in the town to leave the town besides the way you came in, which is from the north. And everyone's talking about, oh, the desert to the east, the castle, the Queen's Castle is the desert to the east or west. I don't remember. It's one of the directions. I think it's east. And so it's like, oh, we don't know what to do. Like, we can't even go chase after these people and help them. Right? And rescue our people got kidnapped. Oh, I'm so worried. And Ruin's running around being panicky. And so you finally all gather together. You, Mash, Baron, Ruin, and Ferris in the inn. And she's like, all right, guys, I'm going to cast a portal that's going to take us to the desert. And then we can get to the Fairy Queen's castle from there. And someone's like, you're going to do what now? And and then she does it. She casts this like portal, and then just right in the middle. And then Ruin's like, hell yeah! And he dives right in, and Mash is like, all right, fuck it, whatever. Treasure's great. And so they both head out, and then it's just Ferris and Baron and you. And you talk to Baron, and he's like, well, that was unexpected. Like, I didn't know she could do such things. Like, that's an interesting thing. And you talk to her, and she's like, come on, we gotta go rescue those people in the fairies, in the fairies castle, the Fairy Queen's castle, and like, we got this, I trust you, and stuff. And you're like, cool, thanks, babe. And so we go, and we pop right up in the desert, and there's nowhere to go. The portal stays there. I left and went back and talked to the guy because I'd gone to the arena, and he's just like, "Oh, I'm translating it, but I'm not quite there yet. Maybe if you can rescue all those people from the Fairy Queen's castle." I'm like, "All right, motherfucker. Don't tell me to go to the arena and then come back. Say, come back after you take care of the Fairy Queen the first time, you asshole." But it's fun that he like changes his tone. He's like, "I got some of it figured out, but I'll come back later. I'll figure out the rest." So you end up in a desert, and there's scorpions there again. Fucking scorpions. And then there's like sandworms, because of course. And somewhere like in the middle of the desert is the entrance to the Queen's castle. So the Fairy Queen's castle is pretty intense puzzle-wise, I gotta say. I remember being frustrated multiple times, and it's got... I want to say it has 6 levels? We get taunted continuously through signposts on the wall and just randomly inserted like conversations by Romnus, or Roma, or whatever, the Goblin King, or whatever he's supposed to be, that are just like, "Ha, you're an idiot. Ha, you fell for my trap." And there's a lot of traps. Like sometimes you read plaques on the wall and they poison you. Sometimes, I don't think there's ever like a booby trap. But then there's the spike traps in the ground here are like invisible. Like you can't see them. And sometimes they move around. And so that's pretty annoying. Then there's floors that disappear and reappear, like with pits underneath. But they're clearly designated. They're like a green mesh color. So that's annoying. There's more moving floors. There's more you jump on the things and move them yourself. And then the puzzles are a little more obtuse. And that the puzzles being obtuse isn't that bad, to be completely honest, because, he's a guide for a lot of this. But trying to figure it out on your own, I feel like would be a lot more frustrating. The biggest frustration, though, I mean, I could have figured it out. None of the puzzles are like that obscure, where it's like if you don't just sit there for a little bit and kind of like think about it and like try some things out, you'd probably figure it out. I ain't got time for that shit. But the real frustrating thing, and you see this later on as well, and it actually gets worse in the final dungeon, like a lot worse. But there's the backtracking. It starts to get a little ridiculous, as in like you got to start going up and down floors a little bit, and the keys all have like clues, but the clues are usually pretty terrible. Like I remember one clue being something like, "You found this key on the 2nd floor. It would sure love to be in a dark place," or something like that. And it's like, the fuck does that mean? Because guess what? It's taking you to a room that's dark, but you've never been in that room, so you don't know what that fucking like. Like, how are you supposed to guess, right? So you gotta, and you have like, this is the first time in the game we're using the like goggles. The X-ray goggles is really like, you got to be using these fucking goggles to play this game, especially without a guide. But even with the guide was like, oh, like a strategywiki.org. So at times it'd be like, oh, this puzzle's this. At other times it'd be like, there's an easy puzzle here, moving on. And you get there and you're like, this is not very straightforward, to be completely honest. Like, whatever. Or it would be like, get the waterfall key. The waterfall key actually was very obvious because there's a literal fucking waterfall. But it was like, get the waterfall key. All right, then in the next room, and I'm like, in the next room from this room, or in the next room through the door that the waterfall key opens, right? So the strategy guide for Brainlord starts to kind of taper off too, which added to some of the frustration. As in, I was like, I don't know exactly what this is telling me to do, but there's nothing around here, so I guess I'll start just wandering around. Which, this issue is not super bad here, but it's like you get some hints of it, and you're like, oh, that sucks. And then in the final dungeon, you're like, fuck this place. There's so much back and forth. It goes from like up to this point, even in the Fairy Queen's like Ice Palace, the puzzles aren't so bad that it's like, man, fuck this game, because you can kind of figure it out, and there's like little backtracking, but as long as you've been playing the game somewhat like steadily, like I think this whole thing took less than 10 hours. So like if you're just kind of walking through it, you can remember where like locked doors are for the most part, and if you don't, you could always write it down. Sorry, excuse me. So we push on through, we get some, rescue some people, and the people are like, oh, we're fine. Oh, the goblin kidnapped us, but then he was very nice and made sure we were all okay, and then kind of locked us down here. We're having a hard time finding Vanessa, who is Ruin's fiance, who he really wants to find, right? And we get some like more weird talk from Ferris as we're going along, like she kind of like tapers off a few times. She also gives us another spell or so as we're going along. And at some point, I think it's Ferris, we get the stop time spell, which is crucial from how I couldn't figure out any other way to hurt the main boss of this level, which is not actually the Goblin King. It's some sort of weird phantom creature that you can't hit with anything until you stop it with the stop time spell. So maybe there's another way to hurt it. I didn't obviously try everything because I don't give a fuck. But once I tried that, I was like, well, they just gave me the spell. Let's try that. So I tried it. It like made them stop being like hazy, which Produce, which is the name of the game we developed, or the name of the company that developed these games, they love this like mechanism. So I better keep an eye on for it for Mystic Arc, which is the next one in the game series, because there were several bosses that you just couldn't hit unless you used like a very specific item, or yeah, it was always an item, or the runes in the first game. Anyway, so yeah, not too much going on here. Just a lot of like going through a lot of rooms, a lot of different areas. Trying to think. Pick up some more armor. Rescue people. The people. Yeah. Okay, so you finally get to the end. Ruin just keeps getting more and more stressed out. There's one point where you run into Mash, and she's like acting super sus. Like suspect. Like she's like looking at a wall and you go like, hey, and she's like, oh, hey, what do you want? I'm not doing anything. And you're like, weird. But then nothing comes of it. So it's like, okay. Seemed very antsy for absolutely no reason, which was odd. But whatever. So like I said, you get to the end, there's the Goblin King or whatever, and he's got wings, which is cool. And he taunts you, and then he disappears and summons 3 ghosts, essentially. And the first time, I just like tried to hit with a bunch of different stuff, nothing worked. And then the second, so I died. So then I reloaded my save state right before the room. Obviously, I'm using save states. And then cast stop spell on them. That made them stop like being hazy and being like a solid figure. And then it took like 5 shots to kill each one. So I just took care of them one at a time. Pretty straightforward. Then you head to the back room, and there's a Goblin King. He's like, "Oh, I'm not impressed. I'm gonna destroy you. Something. And then Ferris shows up like magic, like literally magic's in the room, and she's like, "Stop, Ramus, you're being bad boy." And he's like, "I'm sorry, man, my queen." And then you're like, Dokodiska? And she's like, "I am the fairy queen. Every 200 years, the power of the magic of the fairy castle chooses someone with a lot of magical energy and makes them the fairy queen. So that person is me. I just wanted to test you to make sure that you were going to be good to find the dragon, who, yes, the dragon exists. Yes, I know where he's at, and we're friends. And he's on the other side of the volcano. The problem is the path to the volcano has been sealed." And then she refers back to that statue we found, like, several levels before, like before we got to the town of Toronto, where there was that weird statue that was missing like a gem, and she's like, the gem's been missing for like 200 years or something, so there's no way to get to that side, or not 200 years, it's been missing for like 5 years, sorry. So no one's been able, so I can magic over there, but I can't magic you over there. And in my head, I'm like, you just magicked us into this palace. But maybe that's like a more specific fairy queen magic. She can like return to her home and bring others with her, I guess. But that's cool. So she's the fairy queen. She doesn't have wings or anything. She's still our girl Ferris. And then she's like, let's go back and talk to everybody. So you all head back to Toronto, and you have like a meet and greet, and everyone discusses what's going on. And they're like, wow, you're the fairy queen. Oh, also you rescue Vanessa on the, I think right before the Goblin King. Ruin's like, I got my girl, I'm going to head out. Adios. And you're like, bye, homie. And he's like, I believe in you. You got this. And you're like, cool. So when you head back, you have a long discussion about trying to find the sapphire. And everyone's like, I got an idea. I'm going to go try this. Oh, Baron's like, oh, I'm going to try this. And Ruin's like, I'm going to go make sure Vanessa's okay, and then I'll help you look. And then Ferris is like, we have to find that sapphire. And she like repeats herself. And you're like, cool. So you go talk to everybody in town, and everyone's happy that people have been returned and the children returned. It's not like the Elnard, when you rescue the children and you go back to those towns and there's like more children running around being like, yeah, that was fun. This time it's just there's just the same amount of people, but they're like, oh, everyone returned. And you're like, oh, that's great. And Vanessa's family's super happy, so good for them. We go return to, and then like the chest in the casino, or the Coliseum, or the arena, whatever they call it, that you couldn't open because the old man was standing there. You can get it now. It's got a heart container, so that's good to have. It's always good to have more life. Games like this, especially. and then we go talk to the old man who was interpreting our silver plaque, and he talks about the same thing essentially. He says, "Oh, the dragons are connected to the Dark Lord, and the dragons came to like banish the demon. I think it was Demon Lord, the Demon Lord, and when if they're gonna die off, it might release the Demon Lord. So we have to do that." And then he's like, "What? What statue? Oh, yeah, that statue? Yeah, I don't know. I heard something about Ruon, not Ruin." Who's our homie who's engaged to Vanessa, but Ruon, who's the guy from the first town who like got his buddy killed, who I think is supposed to be your dad, and he's all sad eponymous about it, and he's just like being a layabout and causing trouble back home. I heard he had the gem. You should go talk, or he might know about the gem because he used to be an adventurer, got all over the world, and did lots of fun things back in the day. And you're like, cool, I'll go talk to that guy. And so you do, and he's like hidden in the schoolhouse behind like a plaque in like his own room. But everyone in the school is like, I've seen him, but I don't know where he goes. And then you go to this giant bedroom with all this stuff in it, and you're like, how does nobody know this is here? Like, what the fuck? Anyway, so we find him there, and you're like, hey, buddy, I'm trying to rescue the last dragon, or get to the last dragon so I can defeat the Demon Lord. And he kind of waxes poetic for like 3 lines, and then gives you the sapphire, and is like, here you go. If anyone can do it, you can. I believe in you. You're the best. You've inspired everyone. Hooray. And you're like, awesome. So then we head to the statue, and we put the sapphire in, and boop, boop, boop. It teleports us to the exact same statue, but now on the hillside of the volcano. And there's some new enemies here. Some arrow guys are a little harder, and there's these flying dragon guys who are the biggest assholes ever, because they take like 2 or 3 shots, but they fly around very quickly. And so while you're hitting them, they don't bounce back, really. And so you hit them, and then they just charge into you anyway. And it's like, oh, it's so annoying. And this is a little bit of a maze, to be completely honest. Because like I was following it, and you can follow it all the way down to the beach. And I'm like, okay, this probably isn't right. So then I was like, I'm going to try going up. And then I was trying going up, and I ended up right back at the beginning. And then I like start working around. And eventually, I saw the cave, and then there was like a big pillar in the way, or big like monster-looking thing. But eventually I got my act together and worked my way around. Now this dungeon, Drago Volcano, there's no interaction with our homies, which is kind of sad, just because they're funny and they always add like a little bit of spice to everything that's going on. But that's okay. We kind of wrapped up a lot of their stories. At some point when I was back in Ark, there's a like the quest board has a note that's like, we're looking for Mash, her parents, from her hometown. If anyone's seen her, please let us know. We'll give you lots of money. We're super rich. And you're like, oh, that's interesting. And then it comes up a little bit at the end of the game where someone's like, what about you going home to your parents like you said you were going to do? And she's like, nah, I want to adventure more. Fuck those guys. And everyone's like, yay, friends forever. So that's cute. So yeah, but in Drago, it's like a lonely adventure because we're the only ones who are able to come, and so we're trudging through this thing. And then Drago's doesn't have puzzles per se. It's got these large dark rooms where which the darkness is fine because you can see everything like well enough. It's like all tinted in red. So I didn't really feel like I needed to use the light fairy at all here. I think I pulled her out like once but I was like, oh, this is not really helpful. But the puzzle is not a puzzle. The puzzle is just, hey, the rocks, sometimes they move. So you're like, this is where I was really, like, I'm pulling out the goggles, like, constantly looking at them, like, okay, that looks like a room I need to get to. And so you, like, wander up to that room, but it's, like, completely surrounded in rocks. And I was like, and this is before I, like, realized what was happening. I was like, fuck this. So I move around, I'm, like, looking around for, like, another entrance, and then I get, like, turned around, and then I come back, and the rocks that were completely covering that entrance were, like, moved. They just weren't there. And I was like, the fuck? And I was like, did I hit a switch? Or do I need to kill monsters? And no, they just, like, when they're not on screen, periodically they'll move, quote unquote, which means they just disappear or come back. Lord, give me strength. And I'm sure there's some sort of trigger. I can never really quite figure it out. But it just means you're like walking around, going back and forth a lot to try to like trigger whatever's going on to get these rocks to get the fuck out of the way so you can like complete the quest. And there's like 3 of these. There's like 3 levels of this bullshit. And it's like super annoying. And at no point was I like, yes, this was great. Oh, on that note, one of the other things I forgot about the Ice Queens, or the Fairy Queen, I keep saying Ice Queen because it's like an ice-based level, is that there were slick floors. And there were like sometimes there was water that would push you in a certain direction, and you could get spiked boots at some point that Ruin helps you find, so that you can walk across the spiked floors without being as slick. And I say that purposely instead of being like not slick at all, because you would still slip just like a little bit. Like when you're moving, it's not like everywhere else in the game where like you would stop pressing the move button and you would stop immediately. It's like even with the spiked boots, I would stop pressing the button and it would still move like just a little bit. While before it's like you would just keep moving. Like it's like a normal kind of ice level in a game. But we get through Drago, the volcano eventually. We just get through it. Was there a boss here? I don't remember if there was a boss in this level. So I want to say there was not. Oh, think. If there was, it was extremely easy, and I had no problem defeating it because I literally can't remember anything about it. Okay. Well, if the boss exists, I will put video of it around this point, and you will see that I have a bad memory. But that's not what's important. What's important is that we get to the end, and there's a dragon, and the dragon tells us the same thing that the plaque told us that someone else hinted at before as well. That like the dragons, there used to be a lot of dragons, and having all these dragons kept the demon king off the planet and like made everything happy and kind of reduced the level of monsters, just their like existence for whatever reason. But now that he's like the last dragon, he's like barely holding on, and that if he dies, the demon lord will be released, and that we need to do something about it before that happens. We need to defeat the demon lord before he becomes fully strengthened or whatever, so that so then the dragon can like die in peace, essentially. And we're like, cool, man. And he's like, I got a little bit of power left, I'll give it to you. So then he increases our guard by 10 and our attack by 5, which is good, because like I said, the best weapon in the game gives you like, I think I saw 15. No, I think the axe gives you 20 attack, like 20, and the weapon I'm using only does 9. So it's like an increase of having like the best. That 5 increase in strength is like a pretty significant amount. And guard too. Like the best armor I think is 20 as well. So it's like 50% more defense right on top of that. So that's great. And then after that, we just teleport back to Ark. So Ark's doing good. Guess who's not doing good? Toronto. There's like a big shake 'em ups that we hear about. And what happened was bugs, after we met with the dragon, bugs crawled their way up through the ground in Toronto and attacked. So everyone's like hiding out inside. A lot of people have fled to Ark and whatnot. So it's our job once we head back to Toronto. Oh, this happens. Sorry, I went to Ark and then I headed to Toronto to meet up with everybody, because that was what was requested by Ferris once we took care of the dragon. So we head back and we have a conversation about the dragon, about the looming demon lord business and all that stuff and everything else that's occurred. And then the whole thing like shakes. And then Ruin's like, oh no! And he runs to go rescue Vanessa, and Mash runs out, and they're like, oh, we gotta go attack the demon lord's epicenter. We gotta figure out what's going on. The town's under attack by bugs, something. So we head out, and yeah, there's bugs just like walking around in town, and we can fight them. Seems like most people are doing okay. They're just hiding out. And then there's a bunch of like entrances to these like bug warrens, and this is really where the game starts to get kind of like, ugh, what the fuck is going on? Because you have all these entrances, and then you go underground, and it's dark, because of course it is, so you gotta use your light fairy, which I think this is the last time the light fairy comes into play. Because I said in the volcano, even though rooms were dark, it was really not necessary, because you could see where all the stones were, and all the, so it was kind of like, it's like dark in here, but not dark enough. It's pretty dark in the bug caves. And I just kind of like wandered around for a bit, and eventually I stumbled upon, it's like 3 levels too. It's like, oh my gosh. So eventually I stumbled upon like the area where I was supposed to be, which is the Platinum Shrine. And the Platinum Shrine is pretty terrible. I hinted at this before, but you would have to play it to do real justice. Like there's like this black gooey stuff that people keep commenting about. And I say people, I mean like your friends while they're in there helping out. Because, you know, after Ruin rescues Vanessa, make sure she's okay, he comes along, Baron comes along, Mash comes along, everybody follows you through the tunnel, essentially, and then you kind of bump into them in the Platinum Shrine. And we get some more business from Ferris and Ruin, who kind of help out and, like, talk about things. Ferris, particularly, is just, like, really not a fan of the black goo water stuff. It doesn't do anything besides what normal just falling into a hole would do. One thing I forgot to mention previously in the Fairy Queen's Palace is that there is an area with water, and if you fall in the water, you can find some good items because you actually go underwater, but then you like slowly lose life, like as if you were poisoned, until you like climb back out of it, and it's like a small room, so it's really not that hard to climb back out of it. So it's pretty low key. But in the Platinum Shrine, we can find the best sword in the game, the best armor in the game, the best helmet in the game, which are all the Platinum items, as you would suspect. This thing's got like 6 floors, and there is so much backtracking. It was super annoying. And then you have these statues that come to life, but only when you like walk directly past them. So it's like pretty much a guaranteed hit. Like, unless you're, I don't know. You'd have to time maybe, like, because I tried casting spells or throwing boomerangs at these statues that were clearly the ones who were going to come alive because they're like slightly like colored differently. But they cannot take damage until they come alive, which is kind of bullshit. So that's annoying. So I had to like, at one point I had to go back to Ark or actually I think I went back to Toronto to get mushrooms, which are the second best healing item. The best healing item is the hearts, actually, to be completely honest. The best food in the game that heals you is the meat, but meat only drops from enemies. So the mushroom heals you for about 10, which is pretty good. So but again, like and then there's like the main enemy that you run into is this like soldier guy who just takes a lot of hits. There's a previous soldier guy that's like big, that takes up like multiple, it's like probably twice your size at least, 4 times your size if you count width. But these guys are the same size, and they just take a lot of hits, and they're kind of annoying, and there's a lot of them. And then the statues are really just kind of assholery. We get ground that breaks when you step on it, which is involved in a lot of puzzles. I'm trying to think if there's anything really new. A lot of the quote-unquote like puzzle aspect of this part of the game is just like you get these keys and they're like, you got this key on the 2nd floor. It says some bullshit. And you're like, okay, cool. And, and there's like 10 keys in the Platinum Shrine. And 2 of them get you through like the last 2 doors. Literally just like you open one door, you go to the next, you follow a corridor, open the 2nd door, and that's like the final boss. But the rest of them, like it's a lot of like backtracking, moving around, a lot of dealing with these like assholes. The other shitty enemy is because there's so many like pits, and there's so many like breakable ground and all this stuff. And so of course the new enemy that's brought up has the same power as that second boss that like draws you into him. But they're always like hanging out in these like pit areas. So you'll just be like minding your own fucking business, or you'll like try to jump over like a little pit area because there's a lot of that shit too. And then one of these guys will just be like close enough in range where they'll use their power, and as you're jumping, it'll just like pull you right into the pit. God damn it. But they're like angled enough where you can't even hit them with like a bow or a spell. You gotta like, it's like pretty annoying. So you gotta like kind of lure them out before they like open up their attack and then kill them. And they die in like 1 hit. So, but that killed me more than like anything else in this game, to be completely honest. Or not killed me, but did more damage to me. Like it gave me more frustration because I kept falling down these pits. And when you fall down the pit, you gotta go back to the beginning of like the puzzle, and it's like, oh my gosh, Lord, give me strength. Eventually, you run into Baron, who's been like not mortally, but he's been wounded pretty bad, and he's got to go. And he's like, "Oh, this is it for me. Oh, here, take this. It is the greatest creation of scientific magic," which is the first time that term comes up. And so in my head, I'm like, "Are spells what?" I feel like that was a poor translation. Scientific magic, whatever. Anyway, it's called Phaser, and it's 100% required to get through this level. Because what it does is when you use it, yes, it hurts enemies a tiny little bit if you hit them with it. But what it most importantly does is that over pits, it creates walkways temporarily. So you can walk across them, and it's not like super temporary. It's not like you walk across them and they fall away. Like there would be times I would like cast a couple of them and just stand there trying to like get a bearing for the land or figure out what I'm supposed to be doing, or like see an enemy that I want to try to figure out how to kill. But if you stand there too long, then it will start to fall. But they fall like in order of how they showed up. So you just got to like use it again real quick and then move on to like the next space. And Phaser's one of those things where like, oh sweet, I got this new ability that helps me cross these chasms. Oh, sweet summer child. Little do you realize in video games when you're given a gift or something you see as like, oh, this will make it easier. The game understands that you have this gift. And instead of just allowing you to open up the world, it is like, all right, now that he's got this fucking thing, how do we punish them for using it? Because the dry circle orb things, monsters that pull you in, they didn't really show up in like, they showed up a little bit, right? Which is good game design because it's like I saw them and they used their powers on me in like a room where there was no falling pits, and I was like, that's kind of annoying. But then once I got the phaser and started needing to use it to get like the rest of the keys, they were like everywhere. And the pathway you create, so the normal pathway is kind of like a 4x4 square, if you will. And so it's like 4x4, 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 right? So it's a decently sized. You can move around on it a bit as your character. When you cast the phaser, it's a 1x1. So you're like barely on this thing, and if you like, you can move around on it a little bit, so you can like get some space to like jump, because you have to be moving to jump. You have to be in motion to jump, otherwise you'll just jump straight up and down. So it gives you just enough space to kind of handle that. And so when the guys start pulling you on like the big squares, like the 4x4 squares, you can like kind of fight against it a little bit. When they start pulling you on the little squares, there's like nowhere for you to fucking go, because they pull you off like instantaneously because you're already like on a razor's edge there, or you're like more in the middle and you like push back, but because you're so far on the other side, you just fall off that way, and it's like, oh my gosh, this fucking thing. And so I would avoid them at all costs. Oh yeah, before Baron like croaks it, Mash uses her magic to send him back to town so he can heal up. Don't worry, he's fine. We see him in the epilogue, if you will. And then Mash is, chit-chats with you a little bit. And eventually you collect all the keys and collect all the goodies. And you head into the chamber with the Demon King. Dun, dun, dun. And he's essentially got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 phases, I want to say. So at first he's just like this shambling kind of like scorpion monster with a tail. And you can only hurt the tail. Again, I'm super overpowered at this juncture, and I have a boomerang, so I can like stand back away from this guy and just throw the boomerang at him. I think it took maybe 10 shots per item. So when I say item, I mean like, so his tail's weak, you can attack his tail. So I hit it 10 times and his tail destroyed, and then he like morphed a little bit in his face. So then I could hit his face, and I hit his face 10 times, and then his like right arm transforms into a caterpillar that does the magic missile, but his magic missile was far more proficient than my magic missile because it would like track me down. Well, when I cast magic missile, it would just send these like loblets out, and they would just like float away and not do shit. And I was like, this is a terrible spell. But with him, he uses it, and I would be like running away from these things, and they would track me down. So that sucked. But not too hard. Again, you hit him 10 times. He's good. I had to use a mushroom at this part because he was like really crushing it. When they hit you, the boss hits you, even with my guard, like I had the best armor, best shield, best armor, best shield, best helmet. I used, if not all, most of the protect pots. He was still doing 2 life points every time he hit me, so his strength's pretty tough. So if you don't have all that stuff, you might be going down real fast. But it was just kind of shocking because at this point my heart gauge is almost all the way full. It's pretty full. It looked like I was missing 4 heart containers, roughly. But I'd still have like, I wouldn't say like 14 maybe hit points. And so when you go from like 14 hits, you can take to like 7. That's like a drastic difference. So that kind of threw me off at first. I died once just because I didn't realize he was doing 2 points of damage until he did. But so second time was the charm. Kill the caterpillar. Then you have to attack phase 3. Phase 4 is the face again. And then his right arm transforms into like, I don't want to call it a butterfly because it was like more like a bat, but he had the caterpillar arm, so it's kind of like, or maybe it's a millipede arm. Anyway, but it was kind of like a butterfly, so that's what we're gonna go with. So he has the butterfly arm, so then it flies around, so you kill that, but you can also hit him in the face while the caterpillar arm's going around, so I don't know, I could maybe not have to kill the butterfly. I did, because it was annoying, because it like flies around, and it was just easier to kill it. So I kill that, and then it's phase 5, and then phase 6 is just hitting him in the face until he dies for good. And it's like, no, da, 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 da. I'm trying to remember if he even like speaks to you at any point. I think he does. He talks some shit, some mad shit, right before you start your fight, and then after you kill him, he just has nothing to say because you worked him over so good. But then the whole palace, the whole Platinum Shrine starts to like fall apart into like the rivers of darkness or whatever. And so our boy, the Reemer, tries to escape. He's running and running and running, but eventually, no, he collapses into the darkness. No. And the credits roll, and I was like, damn, girl. And then I remembered there's another sequel to this game with the same character, and that later on he also has to become King Reemer, and so he can be killed by Satan. And I was like, okay, well, Good thing I know all that backstory, so I don't have to worry. And don't worry, after the credits roll for a bit, we see like this grass field, and we see Reemer laying down, face down in the ground, with like the wind blowing through his hair. It was like very impressive, especially compared to all the rest of the graphics in the game. I was like, dang, girl. And then we get some more credits, and then after those credits, we see the bartender from Ark is like looking, or he's posting a new thing, and he says something about, oh, hey, it looks like they're going to need more work from you to do something. And then Reemer comes walking in, and he's the silent protagonist, so he doesn't say shit. Everything I say for him is what I was thinking as him. It's my fellow character. And so you roll in, you're like, awesome, we can do this, I can do this thing. And then guess what else is there? Baron's there, he's better. Ruin's there. Guess what? Ruin has a kid. Hooray! That or his wife's pregnant. I think she's just pregnant. So they're married, and I don't think he has a kid yet. And then Mash is super excited, and this is when Ruin's like, wait, weren't you going to go back and be like checking with your parents or whatever? And she's like, fuck that, I want adventure! And you're like, cool. And Baron's like, I'm too old for this shit, but I still want to go adventuring too. And then Ferris is like, we together will always be a party of adventurers and have a great time. Hooray! And that's Brainlord. So Brainlord, I enjoyed it. It's not usually my cup of tea, these kind of like Zelda action adventure games. I kind of have like in my mind to play like the original 3 Zelda games, which are Legend of Zelda, Link, and A Link to the Past, which are the only Zelda games. Oh, and the Dream one. I don't really play the Dream one. Those are the main ones from the story perspective that I really give 2 shits about. Yeah, there's a bunch of like fan-made versions of them where they like change stuff or whatever. So and then I also have like the BS. It's not BS. It's called the Stellavision version of the Zelda games that came out, which is where they like broadcast stuff and you could play episodes of the game like you were watching a TV show for like 1 hour a week or something. Anyway. But that's like kind of nostalgia. I played a lot of Zelda when I was younger. But generally, I'm not super into these kind of like action... I don't even call them role-playing games. These just kind of like action-adventure kind of Zelda clone games. But this one is pretty good. I like the... I always forget the name. Produce. Produce, again, does a good job with like the subtle storytelling and the subtle hints and kind of like building the world out and having nice little story bits. I still have no fucking clue what happened to like the shopkeeper and the innkeeper's sons. They like wandered off to go adventuring, and that was like the last we all heard of them. So I guess they're dead, which would make sense. But just everything and like the build up, and we never got like a firm conclusion with your dad. I'm pretty sure he died. I just don't think it was voiced well in the translation. Granted, this is like a fan. No, this was the official translation. That's right. This got translated English. So it's just like the English localizer, stress translator. I just feel like they missed out on explaining some of the stuff that was probably there. Because it makes, it's like, you get stuff that like hints around it almost. Like when we meet Ruon for the Sapphire guy, like he comes up in the very beginning of the game. Like people are talking about him, how he was an adventurer, how he went with somebody to the Tower of Light years ago, and then he returned injured, but the other guy died. And it's like, I think that's my dad. But no one's like, and the guy, Ruin never is like, hey, I apologize that like I came back without your dad and that he was dead. Sorry, buddy. So it's just kind of weird. But everything with like Vanessa and Ruin was cute. The whole Ferris reveal was very like, oh goodness, that was awesome. So it's just like you're looking at like a very limited amount of like in-your-face storytelling, and a lot of just like meeting everybody in the dungeon was like always fun. It was like, oh, what's this motherfucker doing? And then like they actually had like their actions had like ramifications. Like you went in to get the dragon scales and you fought the cockroach king and got in there, but then Mash had like found a way to get in through the back door, and everyone had already like rolled in there and jacked all the dragon scales, and so it diminished like the amount of gold you could get, which didn't have like a long-term like big effect on how the game really played out. But it was like, it's one of those things where it's like I feel like the world's like a full place and that stuff's going on and that characters have lives outside of like just my adventuring thing. And so definitely this thing was like never on my radar, and I wouldn't have played it now if it wasn't like a pseudo sequel to 7 Saga. But I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad I played it. And I would say it's good. It's good times. Good times had by all. But yeah, that's Brainlord. All right, y'all. Catch you later.